Welcome, Chirag. Thank you so much for coming. And I see that your history is so interesting, that you've been based in LA and Chicago. I'd love to hear a little bit about the startup scene in both those cities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about tonight's talk. LA, Chicago. I mean, look, I think, so I've done, I think, 10 deals now in the last 3.5 years, all of which have been in LA, New York, and most recently Seattle. And so I'm a huge believer that innovation can happen outside of the Bay Area. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that the Bay Area has an incredible number of merits. The ecosystem here is unlike anything I've experienced or seen. The number of the interconnections, the levels of experience and sophistication in the investor community and in the entrepreneurial community here is really unparalleled. That said, the Bay Area doesn't have a monopoly on innovation. And so I, for one, spend a ton of time in what investors might consider secondary markets, because I think that you can find some really, really compelling companies. If you think about what LA is really good at, for example, it's putting butts in seats, right? So they're the capital of the entertainment world. And now you look at how technology is intersecting that space with VR, AR, with new sort of types of media distribution and content. LA is very much at the epicenter of that. And so, and in e-commerce, I think that one of the challenges that sometimes Bay Area consumer companies have is forgetting who the mass consumer is, right? In the Bay Area, we really do live in more of a bubble. LA and Chicago are much more diverse cities socioeconomically and in terms of who you interact with. Even if you're in the tech community in those cities, you're in the minority, and so your collisions with people tend to be far more diverse, I think. And so that, I think, lends itself to building consumer models that are sometimes a bit more broad in their focus.
And I would imagine more creative in a way, because sometimes being in a bubble is positive and sometimes it's not positive. It's the same old sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is this sort of Midwest mentality of, if somebody gives you $1, you have to do right by them, right? And so I think you see that a lot with Chicago entrepreneurs. They tend to be very capital efficient. They tend to be more measured about the risk they take, which can be good and bad, right? I mean, I think the good is, it's a more sort of stable ecosystem. The bad is if you really have a tiger by the tail, and I think we're going to talk a lot about that tonight, right? You want to scale, and so you have to take the right amount of risk as well. So
it's just that balance. I came from Europe originally, and obviously in those days it was much more risk averse, and hopefully it's changed now after 7 years. But I saw the same thing there, that obviously a bit more stable, but again, not wanting to take those risks. And
the forgiveness element, right? I mean, I think one of the things that's wonderful about the Bay Area is that we believe in second and third and fourth and fifth chances. And it often takes that many to sort of catch that tiger by the tail or find that right one, right? And so I think that that's one thing that I find really refreshing about being here, that, it's fundamentally an optimistic ecosystem.
Very optimistic.
Often exuberant, perhaps, but yeah.
So tell me, what are you passionate about personally, and what does an entrepreneur need when they come to pitch to you to get you really interested and focused on it?
I think, tell me why, ideas are somewhat commoditized, right? And so I think what you have to believe in is the execution prowess of the founder, and in some sort of unfair advantage the founder has. And I don't mean unfair literally, but what I mean is what in that founder's background, what in the work that they've done prior to the meeting that we're having, what in their network, what in their understanding of the value chain of a business is differentiated such that they're the right team to execute on the idea. So what I look for is not only product market fit, but founder product market fit. Why is this founder dedicating the next 5, 7, 10 years of their life to build this, and what about them or their background leads me to believe that they'll be the ones that win in this market? That's very, very important to me. I'm a huge believer in that sort of personal narrative, because at the end of the day, when the going gets tough, you want to know that there's a real sort of reason why that's beyond just financial gain, that the founder's doing what they're doing.
And are there particular domains that you focus on?
I've historically been mostly consumer focused, but one of the things that I really love about being up here is that it's such a diverse ecosystem that you find, I personally found that, so when I was in LA, I was 100% consumer focused, and that aligned pretty well with the ecosystem. The LA ecosystem tends to be very much focused on commerce, digital media, social, mobile. Up here, I'm a bit more broad in my approach, so I probably spend about 70% of my time on consumer, 30% everywhere else. The last two deals that I've worked on, one is a consumer fintech company, and one is a DevOps company, which I spent zero time in the DevOps world before coming up to the Bay Area. And so I try to keep about 30% of my time loose for just interesting new spaces. One area that I'm spending a lot of time on is the future of food, right? And so something that interests me right now is that you've seen, one, it's a massive market, and two, you're seeing a lot of traditional distribution models being upended. So you have the rise of companies like Plated and Blue Apron that deliver meal kits. You have the Muntries and Sprigs that deliver food on an on-demand basis. Where I'm interested is in people that are pushing forward synthetic, for example. So we're seeing a lot of interesting innovation in synthetic meats, other types of synthetic sort of foods. We're seeing a lot of innovation in the supply chain. So a couple of companies that I met recently are thinking about how do you extend the life of produce throughout the supply chain, because that has an incredible sort of bearing on how you have to manage the supply chain. And so that's very interesting to me. Long way of saying, one of the things that I love the most about this job is having the ability to find sort of kernels of things that you like. So food is something that I've cared very passionately about sort of as a consumer, have looked at a lot of companies in, never really found the right fit, and now I feel like I'm hunting in the right ponds.
Fantastic. So what would you say that that your interests have helped you connect with the entrepreneur? Like, is that relationship with the founder, when you're thinking of investing in them, what are the criteria for you personally that you need?
Do you mean the characteristics of the founder, or?
Obviously, you're going to have to partner with them.
Something that I think a lot about, because I worry that there's a lot of implicit bias in the way that investors think about it, right? There's a reason that, when you look at who's been funded, it's disproportionately white men that went to Stanford and not, African-American women that are from the Midwest, for example. To my earlier point, I think innovation knows no boundaries, and good founders come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And so it's important for me to have great personal chemistry with the founder, but to also not let that sort of, what I don't want to do is back founders that sort of look like me, that talk like me, that think exactly like me, because I think there's a lot of bias in that as well. So I constantly push myself to think of like why I'm attracted to something, or why I'm like, pushed away from something, to make sure that I'm not letting bias sort of enter in the equation.
It's nice that you're so thoughtful, and I think that obviously the crop of young VCs are changing that face of the old pattern matching.
About that, right? My peer group is far more diverse than the peer group in Silicon Valley in the 1970s. Yeah.
So tell me, do you have an interesting or funny story about something that's happened to you as a VC?
Funny you should ask. Just a few weeks ago, there was a founder that I'd got to know really well through a deal that we were looking at. This individual came in to present to the partnership. We had a final pitch meeting, and we had to make a decision on whether or not to issue him a term sheet. 7 hours later, it's Friday night, and I go out with my friends to sort of this rave type concert type pre-Burning Man party. Not really typically where you'd find me on a Friday night, but I have a couple of friends that are excited about this and wanted to go to support them. And so we're all kind of in colorful, psychedelic looking clothes or whatever. And I turn around, and the guy that was just wearing a business suit 6 hours earlier is in the most insane looking outfit 20 feet away from me. And so that was tremendous. I think what that really did was humanize the relationship. I'd been used to seeing him in a very serious context where we were doing, lots of deep diligence on the company in a very professional environment. And I think we had a really fun rest of the night sharing a drink and just laughing at how funny it was that, just 5 hours earlier, he was across a board table from me, and now here we were enjoying the same music. I think it reminds you what a small world it is, and what a small, especially the Bay Area is. It's just the number of serendipitous events that happen here on a daily basis are just incredible.
That's a very cool story. Thank you so much, and I'm so looking forward to this chat. I think it'll be fantastic.
Thank you for having me.